I read several rumors about XRP and the XRP ecosystem virtually every day, but I disregard nearly all of them since they are obviously made up rubbish from people who are trying to gain attention on the internet by typing dumb things with their fat little fingers. Like, I understand that that's what's going on, so I usually ignore them. If a rumor about XRP has been spread widely enough to make me think, okay, this has been seen millions of times, I can't reasonably ignore this any further. I will comment on it and tear it to pieces, even if it's a stupid thing. I will now admit that the kind of information being spread here is a rumor in this specific instance. To be clear, what I'm going to show you in this video are supposedly confidential blueprints from Ripple that were inadvertently released. It is what it is. I'll admit that the arguments made here are not at all crazy. The vast majority of rumors circulate widely. They are simply irrational and crazy, and they are not even remotely based in fact. This one is a little different since, if it's true, it does appear to be rather safe and founded in reality. I could understand how that might be the case. Is this true now? As a content provider in the XRP community, I will say this even though I'm not sure if I know. We do reach that stage again, where it's simply been seen and discussed too much for me to ignore. The number of times this story has been viewed in the last few days is probably in the millions. I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, let's talk about this. Because you're seeing individual accounts, some of which aren't even that huge, but they're still receiving over 100,000 views every post. This is the kind of thing that you should anticipate happening in cryptocurrency, and most definitely in XRP and the XRP ecosystem, even if this particular claim is untrue and is actually a fake. At the very least, it is conceivable in this case. Okay, so this is the headline from one of the many crypto media sites that has reported on this story. Crypto Basic. Peaceful fashion. There are rumors that Ripple and Swiss Bank are collaborating on XRP tokenization, but as we read this piece, you'll realize that it's much more than that. In addition, it involves KYC verification, and some of this is made possible by recent modifications to the XRP ledger. In any case, piece reads as follows. According to new rumors, Ripple and a Swiss bank are investigating XRP-based tokenization and digital ID compliance solutions. And let me just state this. Ripple has stated publicly that they are not involved in any XRP-related activities that fall under the purview of compliance and tokenization. As you'll see a little later in the movie, the XRP ledger can already handle some of that stuff, which is why it's not insane on the digital ID side. Therefore, I'm not sure if Ripple has discussed that area of the cryptocurrency world in detail or even generally. That's not crazy at all. In any case, these rumors started when a person going by the name Lord Belgrave claimed to have leaked a portion of a confidential agreement. Belgrave revealed what he described as a portion of a strategic partnership and mutual non-disclosure agreement between a big Swiss bank and an American blockchain business. Belgrave claims to have previously worked as a Swiss banker. These included improved liquidity channels for wholesale markets, biometric identification integration, tokenization of regulated financial services, cross-border transfers using neutral bridge assets, and real-time gross settlement simulations. He proposed that language that was neutral and unaffected by protocols pointed to resources such as XRP as a bridge. However, rather than referring to retail cryptocurrency, the term tokenized instruments denoted large-scale goods like sovereign debt and exchange-traded funds. Alright, so here's why it makes sense to believe that Ripple would be interested in it. They're already publicly doing something rather similar, so this isn't just conjecture. Hidden Road, which they recently purchased for, $1.25 billion, is being used similarly. They have discussed settling for $3 trillion in actual financial assets listed on the XRP ledger. An estimated $3 trillion is spent each year. That is really rather large. Thus, it is evident that Ripple is highly interested in using the XRP ledger to tokenize real-world assets and conduct genuine foreign currency operations globally. That is not conjecture. That is a true event that is taking place. That's what Ripple said. Therefore, it is not at all odd that they would be collaborating with another bank to develop something similar. I admit that. Therefore, once more, I am unable to confirm whether this particular statement is accurate. I'm not sure. However, considering that it doesn't sound weird at all, and that it's most likely the least crazy rumor that has been widely spread within the XRP community, at least in recent memory, I'll say this. That's how I would describe it. This sounds more insane than anything I can think of that has recently been widely shared. It's really simply the standard greatness that we know XRP and the XRP ledger can produce, basically. In any case, the article goes on. Additionally, he emphasized allusions to multi-layered liquidity corridors, which he claims deal with the unification of fiat networks, tokenized securities, digital currencies issued by central banks, and neutral assets under a unified international framework. He claimed that the deal laid the groundwork for worldwide alongside tokenized finance markets. If this is the case, and if they are working so hard on the paint, this is the kind of stuff that will undoubtedly contribute to the long-term viability of XRP and the XRP ledger. Tokenizing everything on the fucking planet that you can on the XRP ledger and gaining widespread adoption early on are two of the most apparent things that should be done. The XRP ledger is also one of the first to do this. For a different reason, Kim, I noted in my most recent video that gold was being tokenized on the XRP ledger as early as 10 years ago. The XRP ledger has always been excellent for this, but the number of blockchains that are used for this purpose will only be limited. Tokenizing almost every kind of financial asset on the planet doesn't require an endless number of blockchains. You do not need that. There will be X number of areas where there is substantial real-world adoption, but you don't need an endless number of places to do that. In other words, the first players in the market, the XRP ledger being one of them, will most likely prevail. And it does make sense to think that there is a very good probability XRP will maintain its long-term supremacy, especially since the XRP ledger is so well suited for this. Therefore, it's critical to move forward with this in a meaningful manner. We have also witnessed this. On the XRP ledger, money market funds have been tokenized. T-bills have recently been tokenized on the XRP ledger. Due to the slowness of that shit network, Bitcoin is tokenized on the XRP ledger. Since it was the first blockchain ever made, it is the worst. Thus, it is fixed by the XRP ledger. It allows you to accomplish things with Bitcoin that aren't possible on layer 1. You can therefore handle the XRP ledger as though it were a layer 2 technology, even though it is also a layer 1 technology. This will allow you to move Bitcoin at the same speed as XRP. There, the issue has already been resolved, and it's amazing. You like seeing it. Thus, that contributes to Bitcoin's long-term sustainability, and vice versa. I'm trying to convey that this has already occurred. All we want is more of this. That's it, though, if you're wondering why this would even be significant. Because it's clear that the XRP ledger, which is what this is here to stay, the more useful it is. Therefore, as years and decades go by, more people will want to join, investing our hard-earned money in the crypto asset class because it's used. Even those who enter, like myself, for example, and I'm sure the great majority of you as well, who simply want to diversify and get broad exposure to it. In the long run, it's probably not a poor investment because if it's being used, it's unlikely to stop existing. That's how I believe a lot of people will view it. I just think it's apparent. In any case, peace endures. According to Belgrave, the comprehensive agreement also addressed matters of jurisdiction, liability, and governance. But for his own safety, he said he would only distribute portions of it gradually. All right, this is when you begin to lose interest in me, because it's obvious to me that you're doing it to get people interested if you're releasing extremely sensitive information in phases. First of all, you shouldn't be breaking any contractual agreements or secrecy if your only goal is to make this material public and you're prepared to do so. To tell the truth, that is a bit douchey. However, it is for the good of the XRP community if you are going to do that, and you simply want to get it out. I have to inform you that releasing some content now and more later, a week later, a month later, or whatever period of time it is, will not absolve you of responsibility. It won't change the fact that what you did was bad or illegal. To be completely clear, it makes no difference. It's not as if we can't connect a post you made a week ago, a month ago, or something else to something you write a month later. That doesn't make sense, because of course everything will be connected. This clearly indicates to me that the person is doing this to get attention. Therefore, it is true if it is true. This is strange, and it doesn't make sense. There is still peace. He maintained that Ripple's contribution to these initiatives extended beyond use cases for remittances. According to the anonymous commenter, it's an attempt to create a settlement system of institutional caliber. He asserted that other bankers had seen comparable material and that the regulators had examined the document. As was to be expected, the rumors rapidly went viral in the XRP community, with some people naturally connecting the deal to organizations like JP Morgan and BlackRock. According to Belgrave, the project should integrate bridging technologies such as the XRP ledger, tokenized asset settlement, and biometric authentication. However, no official proof has emerged, and none of the businesses he mentioned have acknowledged any involvement. Surprisingly, some of these recommendations do coincide with the industrial context. JP Morgan, for instance, has openly referred to digital identification as a key component of Web3 and asked for more effective and safe verification techniques. Well, of course, that's true. Web 1.0 is generally regarded as just the original internet, where you're reading stuff but not posting much. Because, well, yeah, you could upload websites, but there wasn't really a whole bunch of in-depth social media interface. In contrast, Web 3 is simply a decentralized version of Web 2, which is the internet that we effectively have right now in its current iteration, where we have social media and people can post this and that. This is one area where JP Morgan is obviously correct. Not until the 2000s, actually. Now that we are in Web 3, you won't necessarily have a central authority telling you what you can and cannot post or do. This is because the world is decentralized. In that case, if you lack a means of establishing your identity and proving it, that falls more into the realm of social media. Nevertheless, it is useful to be able to demonstrate your identity because some people will only want to communicate with verifiable individuals. That will just be a possibility. However, in terms of financial transactions and other matters, I don't think the government will become less concerned about KYC and AML regulations and compliance anytime soon, if at all, if we adopt this new decentralized technology. Therefore, you'd best figure out how to put it into practice, which is essentially what's going on here. In any case, the article goes on. In the meantime, Ripple has been making more of an effort to get into mainstream finance and compliance-driven enterprises. The business applied to the RLUSD stablecoin is supported by a Federal Reserve master account and a national bank charter with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Furthermore, Ripple has pushed tokenization and custody solutions, estimating that by 2033, tokenized real-world assets might total $19 trillion. In an effort to enter the custodial market, the company also purchased Medico in May 2023. Additionally, the digital identification characteristics of the XRP ledger have been continuously improved. The XLS40 Decentralized Identifier Amendment, which introduced self-sovereign digital IDs for KYC and AML compliance, was adopted by validators in October 2024. The credentials functionality, which would allow for easy authentication for institutions while maintaining privacy, was announced earlier this year by a Ripple X engineer. Alright, therefore, would this be a sensible move for XRP and the XRP ecosystem? Indeed, without a doubt. I recognize that completely. Is this accurate? I'm not sure. Is this kind of activity undoubtedly taking on in the background? Yes, I mean, not the exact rumor, but some aspects of this are known to the public, and we are aware that these kinds of things are taking place. Therefore, it is not out of the question to believe that this particular statement may be accurate. Simply said, it's a single online claim made by one individual. I'm not sure how you'll handle that, but I felt compelled to address it. In any case, I'll just state that these things are already occurring, even if this particular instance isn't true. The XRP ledger is in a prime position to play a significant role in this emerging financial industry. Exactly. That's definitely the case. Therefore, even outside of this, there is a larger tale, which is another reason I wanted to release this film. However, I'm not sure, dude. I arrived here at the end of 2017. I've had enough of gossip. She was going to be here, I know. The reason I grow tired of them is because, as you can see, but practically all of them are complete and utter crap. You do occasionally get one that is authentic. Is this one of those? I'm not sure. It's the closest thing I believe I've ever heard that sounds real. Once more, at least in the recent past. Take it for what it is then. Tell me what you think, guys. Thanks for watching.